Hello and welcome everyone to this session, Onwards and Upwards, Cities Taking Climate Action as part of the mission for climate neutrality and smart cities by 2030. Today we're having a great opportunity to hear from a few folks who are working out across Europe, seeking to drive progress forward towards climate neutrality by 2030 in their city or on behalf of cities within their country or member state. We also have a video message which we'll be hearing from in a minute. Just as background, it's been just about a year now since the EU formally launched its mission for 100 climate neutral and smart cities. And over the last year, they've identified through an extensive process cities that have volunteered to be part of this mission, and they've selected 100 cities from the EU member states as well as 12 cities from associated countries. And so we have 112 cities formally participating in this mission, and we refer to it as the cities mission because we know there are 5 missions in total that the EU is pursuing right now. First off, I'd like to give you the opportunity to hear from Teresa Ribera, who's the Minister for the Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenge of Spain. And this is a pre-recorded video message, so we'll hear from her now. Thanks.
Dear Commissioner Gabriel, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this very interesting panel. I am very happy to have this slot to exchange views with my colleagues, with my fellow panelists, on an issue which is very important in the Research and Innovation Week: how cities can help in the green revolution we are working for. And this is particularly critical in this point in time where we are discovering the vulnerabilities, the impacts, the difficulties of being dependent on fossil fuels. Europe counts on everything we need. We adopted a very ambitious package last year on the Fit for 55 context. We also bet for the Green New Deal, so to understand how we can build prosperity in our continent. And we know that cities are the very important players that can help to accelerate this transformation. The fact is that by 2050, more than 85% of the European population will be living in cities, and cities are a big consumer of energy, water, and resources in general. We need to rebalance all of this. We need to build healthy and green cities. So the mission innovation dedicated to climate neutral and prosperous cities is a very important step forward. 100 cities have been selected by the European Commission so to be part of this mission innovation. But we know that in Spain there are many cities willing to do similar things. 7 cities of these 100 come from Spain: Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, Zaragoza, Valladolid, Vitoria. But we know that there were more than 25 willing to be part of this experiment, willing to be part of this lab on how cities can become much more livable, much greener, and much more healthier for the citizens. Big cities have lots of things to do, but middle-sized cities can also make a difference. We have mirrored this initiative with this Green Cities 2030 project here in Spain. And there are many cities willing to be joining this initiative, including smaller cities such as Soria, with less than 50,000 inhabitants. All of them try to combine different solutions, dealing with mobility, with retrofitting buildings, dealing with low emissions areas within the city, dealing with greening the city projects that allow citizens to enjoy these greening solutions within their own village. The government of Spain wants to help in this very important initiative. We have been working in building up a platform together with Climate Kick and with the different universities and the main players of this play, which is the mayors of the different cities, willing to construct a different future, a decarbonized future that counts on greening their own space for the neighbors. And it is very interesting to see to what extent the recovery plan has been focusing on this type of initiatives, so to facilitate the available funding to engage into this transformation. The response has been fantastic, and we have been able to develop guidelines so to facilitate the initiatives that any city at any scale can take into consideration to transform their reality. But this is not only an issue for governments. The main players are the citizens, the neighbors. We need the capacity to be an agenda, to be part of an agenda where the participation is key. So citizens willing to do more, citizens supporting what their mayors do is very important to succeed. And this is what we have been trying to work on within this platform. How to be sure that there is a broad participation coming from every single city being part of this initiative. So to identify the priorities and the best options to solve the concrete problems that each city takes into consideration when building a greening plan. How we can work on mobility, how we can work on housing, how we can be sure that the solutions are inclusive but for all types of citizens, how we can be sure that greening the cities build new and healthier cities, how we can work on water, how we can work on waste management, and how we can work with the governance of these experiments are going to be key in this initiative. This is why I want to stress once again our full support for this type of initiatives, but at the same time to provide whatever experience we may be developing in this context, so to exchange views on how we can improve the concrete solutions that any of us is trying to push forward in our concrete national reality. Thank you so much, dear Commissioner, for all your support, for your energy and your commitment. And thanks to you all for being part of this very challenging and exciting adventure.
Great. What a great way to get started, and exciting to hear about all the work happening in Spain. With that, we're going to begin with our first question to you as viewers of this session. We have a Slido poll, so if you could go to slido.com and type in the hashtag RIDays22-1. And the question that you should see is, in your view, the social and economic impact of pursuing climate neutrality is A, very positive, B, rather positive, C, neutral, D, rather negative, E, very negative. We'll come back later to see how the poll turns out, but in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to our first speaker while people are answering questions, and that is to welcome Mr. Bjorn Hugesson, who's the Chief Climate Officer for the City of Stockholm. Welcome, Bjorn.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for this kind invitation. I would like to say a few words about the City of Stockholm and our achievements so far, and what we take with us into this important work with the city's mission. Stockholm and many other Swedish cities started back in the 90s with working with climate mitigation action. And that was as a response to national policies, especially the carbon tax established already in 91. So we started with a program against greenhouse gas emissions. And we have seen quite tangible results since then. If we count per capita, the emissions are down around 70% by now. And main areas to work with are especially the heating grid. We have a citywide district heating, which has now been decarbonized. And it is, the remaining emissions is now from the incineration of household waste. So we need to address the plastic in the waste as a very important issue. The second area is, of course, transport, where we now see a very fast electrification of all different kinds of transport. So this puts a lot of stress on the electricity system and on the user part, on the finances and the infrastructure needs of that sector. And the third part is how to neutralize the remaining emissions by 2030 to become climate neutral. And here there are plans to establish a bioenergy carbon capture and storage plant in Stockholm with our energy company. And that has received also funding from the European Innovation Group. So that will be a kind of flagship for this important technology to actually establish large-scale carbon sinks. So that's a few words about the more technical processes. If we look at the governance and the cooperation with national level, we have a Swedish climate city contract since 2 years back. We work together with a number of cities and 5 government agencies. So with that cooperation, we also have a lot of experience to bring into the European work. We have worked with establishing more innovative working methods, like the triple helix model together with academia and businesses. We also work with portfolio analysis and digital support tools of different kinds to understand the way forward. We also see that it's now more important to work together with citizens and civil society. The process so far has been quite technical, to be honest, a bit top-down, but now we see when we have to go faster forward, we need to work together with citizens more. And the city has a lot of interfaces with citizens in which we can communicate, have dialogue, and co-create solutions. That is something that we are discussing a lot and finding the ways forward. And the third area is about funding, how to find business models, how to take the important step from a successful innovation to large-scale market applications. We see here that society can do a lot here by using the purchasing power, by policy making, by encouraging establishing business networks and so on. But there is also a need for funding to bring it from innovation to market phase.
Great, that's really excellent, Bjorn, and a great launching point to our next speaker. Really appreciate how you've just teed that up perfectly. And our next speaker is Henrietta Espira. She's the Director General for Innovation and Technology in the Austrian Ministry for Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology. That's a big title. You have a big job, Henrietta, so take it away. Thanks.
Thank you so much for not making me spell out the name of the ministry again, because I do think indeed that it's quite important that innovation and technology is really part of this very broad portfolio. And it's also a huge honor to speak after Stockholm, because in Austria we cooperate always quite closely with our Swedish colleagues, and we really learn from initiatives like Viable Cities in Sweden. So it's very nice to be able to speak after Sweden. I myself actually went on a learning journey to Sweden this year. Thank you also for, after my Spanish colleague, for allowing another national perspective to come in here. I think all of us civil servants really loved Mariana Mazzucato's mission idea, because it kind of put us into the driving seat again of a kind of not just top down, which is a bit of a problem, as my previous speaker said, but putting us in the driving seat of kind of creating missions which do, however, have this kind of whole of government approach. Remember the long name of our ministry. What we try to do in Austria is to very early link into the European cities mission. So we have supported preparation activities for Austrian cities. We call this Fit for Urban mission. Although 9 Austrian cities were engaged in this process, only 1 city managed to actually get the European candidate status. Based on the learnings of this process, however, we then designed a national city mission to start from the individual level of preparedness of Austrian cities and then provide tailor-made support. The form we use there is one of a public-public partnership, actually. So we now address 10 large pioneer cities, which include approximately 30% of the Austrian population. And these are expected to basically act as learning environments for system innovation. We expect them to really integrate the governance for climate neutrality 2030. We also expect pioneer quarters. And what we do with our mission, with our national mission, is basically giving money towards administrative capacity building. 2 million euros per city, to really kind of go into this governance issue, which is so important to bring the different bits and pieces of the puzzle together. I already mentioned that learning is very important. So our ministry also will align and further develop our RTI funding portfolio along city requirements and establish support and learning processes with and between cities. So we have a number of platforms to really help cities learning from each other. Obviously, 30% of the Austrian population is not enough to really get to climate neutrality by 2040, which is actually the official Austrian objective. So in order to ensure scale up, we will support the transfer of solutions and experiences to follower cities, which are up to 70 cities with approximately another 20% of the Austrian population. So our mission goal, in line with the European mission, is to facilitate cities to ensure a decarbonization pathway towards 2050 for approximately 50% of the Austrian population. What is needed, and again, many thanks for having the different levels speak at this event, is really something I call a radical collaboration on a local, on a national, on a European scale. So action really must be highly coordinated with ministries, companies, research organizations, societies, citizens were mentioned by both of our previous speakers, and also international cooperation, coordinated actions are essential. So we, for example, in Austria also coordinate one of the Horizon missions, the Driving Urban Transitions mission, and we also want this to feed into our activities. What's most important, and I close with this, my opening statement, is that what we really want to achieve is increasing the impact of innovation funding. And to this end, we really want to make our innovation policy much more transformative. Transformative innovation policy means that we develop significantly more targeted solutions for current and future challenges. Future technology development is just as important as solutions for acute problems such as the heat transition, as my Swedish colleague mentioned. And this joint effort is really something we try and support with our national mission in close alignment and close cooperation with the European level. Thank you.
That's terrific. Thank you. And I know we'll come back on that in a minute when we have some time for questions. That's an exciting description of all the things that is happening in Austria. Very exciting to see. Our next speaker, Elena Simeon, she's the coordinator of a new initiative as part of the city's mission called Capacities, and delighted to have her joining us to talk about that a little bit. She also is with the Romanian Agency for Higher Education, Research, Development, Innovation, and Funding. Welcome, Elena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and thank you for the invitation to join such an impressive panel. In Romania, our also with a long name funding agency is funding research and innovation solutions for cities for many years now. We are doing this in transnational calls launched under the framework of Joint Programming Initiative Urban Europe. This work is not stopping here, of course. We are continuing it with Driving Urban Transition Partnership. That's a larger initiative co-funded by the European Union in Horizon Europe framework. What we do, once the mission has started the collection of expression of interest for cities based on our previous work with the cities, we supported the Romanian candidates in their application process. Also exploring the work done in these transnational initiatives and at national level, our Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digitalization in Romania set up a national hub called Mirror Mission Cities Hub Romania that's hosted by our funding agency. The aim of this hub is to connect national authorities, local authorities, to support together the cities that work towards climate neutrality, and not only the candidates or those that were selected, but also smaller cities. Mentioning capacities, thank you for doing that. We are leading together with our very knowledgeable partners, Research Promotion Agency in Austria, Austrian Institute of Technology, ICLE Europe, Viable Cities in Sweden, ENEA, and even Climate Kick is partner of that network. We are leading this network with more than 60 partners and associated partners, ministers, funding agencies, NGOs, and even cities that work towards mission implementation, but at national level. Luckily, we are getting funds from the European Commission, and we are going to officially start in few days. That's 1st of October. The ambition of our Capacities project is to become the national platform for the mission cities. That is connecting all ongoing and new initiatives at national level that work towards supporting the mission implementation in different national processes. And we're looking ahead for sure to very two challenging years, but I'm sure that we can make it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Elena. All right, we're going to pause just a minute and come back for some questions with our panelists. But first, let's check in on the Slido question. And it looks like the results have come through with very strong response, with the largest percentage, almost half, saying the social and economic impact would be very positive, with almost as many saying rather positive. Very few, in fact, less than 15%, think it's neutral or rather negative, and nobody thinks it's very negative, according to the results of that poll. I think that's encouraging. Not necessarily that surprising, I think, for the audience here. This is something that's been talked about a great deal, but it's great to see that the idea and the resonance of the economic and social benefits of climate action are really in people's minds. With that, let's go to the next question. And this is a question that's going to help us create a word cloud. That question is, in your view, what is the biggest challenge for cities to reach climate neutrality? And again, that's slido.com, hashtag RIDays22-1. And while people are answering that and we're putting the word cloud together, we'll come back to our panelists and have a little bit further exchange based on some questions. And I have time for a question, at least a question to each of you. We'll go in reverse order. So Elena, picking up on what you were talking about and with the Capacities project, it is quite early, but you've also had some time in Romania. I think many of us recognize that there have been long established leaders amongst cities around climate action. But the mission itself, the city's mission, is seeking to be quite inclusive and include cities who are in various states of action. And in your experience, how would you characterize the needs of cities who are still quite early in their journey, and what do you hope through Capacities to be able to bring to those cities?
Well, through Capacities, for sure, we first work with national authorities and regional authorities to build capacities for them to be able to support the cities. The needs, most of the needs so far, identified both with the work within Capacities, but also in DUT and JPI Urban Europe before, relates to funding and defragmentation. So that's something that we aim to tackle both in the transnational network we plan to do, but also with the tailored thematic capacity buildings we are going to, building exercises we are going to do in the member states. So our aim is first to build this capacity for the authorities to be able to tailor effective and appropriate solutions for their local context.
Great, thanks very much for that question, or for that response. It's very interesting, and I think taking that forward to Henrietta to go even further in that direction from the Austrian perspective, as you've been working with the cities, we know from our experience the cities recognize the need for resources for capacity, that there's a real synergistic relationship between national governments and city governments, often including regional governments in that partnership as well, looking for resources to help them with their actions, with their capacity, et cetera. But they're also looking for policy changes at the national level that empower them to do some things that maybe they cannot do right now. And could you give us some examples of how those conversations are progressing in your work in Austria?
Absolutely, and thanks a lot for this question, because this is indeed tagging into what I talked about before, that actually the way we are looking at it is that we have this huge puzzle of measures. And I remember when Matthew Baldwin was still active at the European level as a coordinator for the Cities Mission, he came and he was always a bit apprehensive that, because I myself am Director Innovation Technology, that I might look at this at, just another couple of RTI projects. which might need to be a bit bigger. But actually, what you said is exactly right. And this is the reason why we chose not to just, hand out money for RTI projects, but to actually choose this public-public partnership, which in the end, I guess our Swedish colleagues call it the climate city contracts, and this is also what's planned within the mission, because in the end, these contracts should then include, apart from the climate neutral quarter or specific actions at city level, also things cities expect us to change on a national scale. Things like the road law, things like making cycling easier, things like, allowing within our road laws actually to establish zero emission zones. Things like, we're launching a digital action plan for the mobility transition, digital checks on laws and regulation, experimental laws, which, allow trying out all the different things that are needed. To quote my climate and energy colleague, we are doing surgery on an open heart now. And we know that lots of things need to be done very, very quickly. We need scale, we need speed, but also there's not really, we say transformation quite a lot, but there's not really a blueprint. And this is ideal for, our innovation activities to tap in there, saying, okay, for the things we aren't clear about yet, I mean, we do, especially a city like Vienna has very clear plans on what to do with the heating sector, etc. But there's still things like, using geothermal energy. We found a big field under Vienna. We need to develop specific machines to actually in the courtyards of our old buildings to tap into this potential of geothermal energy. There is still quite a lot of innovation and technology development needed. But it's got to go hand in hand with all the regulatory changes needed. And this is a nitty-gritty business, Thomas. Everyone is always waiting for the, magic stick of, the 3 measures that really get us there. No, it's lots. So what I always say is we need to get a lot more radical, because the targets we have are very, very radical and needed. But at the same time, we need to be a lot more detail-oriented. It's a lot of regulations. It's a lot of laws. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we need to change every one of them.
Well, that's a great way to carry this conversation forward. And next, we'll move on to Bjorn. And Bjorn, with the city of Stockholm, you mentioned, as Henrietta also referred to, the Climate City contracts. And Sweden was the pioneer of the Climate City contracts, and you've had a few years now to work on those and use those as a tool. And I guess the question, because we're not going to be able to get into everything in the time we have, but the question I'd ask you now is, for cities joining the city's mission now who are just starting to look at Climate City contracts for the first time, but doing so with a clear eye towards climate neutrality by 2030, what can you give them in terms of advice about how to use the Climate City contract process from the beginning?
Well, I think one of the strongest effects of this is the sense of belonging to a process together with other cities, that we share a common format, that we open up a dialogue, that we are part of something important, and to make use of that feeling conveyed to all your colleagues, and use it as a force to empower your work. I think that is one important lesson. Then, when it comes to the dialogue with the national level, we also think it's very important to open up that and talk about policy changes. We have actually seen progress on that, and we see that there is a lot of effort being done. We understand that it's difficult also to align 5 different agencies with different missions, but they have come up with call for proposals where they actually have listened to us what we need. We ask not just for funding of innovation, but also funding of implementation power, possibility to hire staff to do the work and to work with training, dissemination, and so on. So we find it important that the national level listens to our actual needs, and we see definitely progress there so far.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I know we're going to learn a lot in the next several months as cities begin, 112 cities begin working with climate city contracts in many different countries and contexts. So it'll be very exciting to watch. We are going to have time for another round of questions just to let our panelists know that we'll be coming around again. But let's pause for a minute and take a look at the word cloud that was generated from our question previously, which was, what would you identify as the single greatest challenge that cities face related to climate neutrality? And you can see that on your screen now. And as we look at the large responses, it's clear that for many of us and many of you, our minds are squarely fixed on the challenges related to transportation and mobility, how we address emissions from cars, and the land use patterns that have really created car dependency and the need for a lot of car use in our cities and around our cities. And so clearly we can see that as being one of the big features. There are some other things there that I think, again, for many of us, not surprising. It's interesting to see how the participants in this webinar are expressing their particular concerns. Some of them are technical, some of them are institutional, and some of them are cultural. And so we'll have a lot of time and a lot of things to think about in the context of that word cloud as we go forward. Let's pick that up going forward in the next round of questions. Henrietta, I'm going to start with you. And we'll have to keep relatively short responses here to get through everybody this one more time. So I'll try to ask you a question that lends itself to a straightforward answer if I can. Within the conversations in the Austrian government and with the cities that you're supporting directly, what's one thing that the Austrian government can do in 2023 that's going to make a material difference for cities in helping them build momentum towards the climate neutrality target of the city's mission?
You know, first of all, you know me already, I have a tendency to long answers. Secondly, I just said that there's no magical stick, but okay, here we go. we know at the moment, because we're also the energy ministry, we really launched tons and tons. We launched a big transformation fund, which are really actually billions of euros going into massive investments, which indeed are needed. My previous speaker from Stockholm said that, which indeed are needed to, really get all the public transportation investments, all the PV investments, all the, massive also restructuring of infrastructures. So, at the moment, we're really trying to get together all these funds. I think we should do more in terms of the legal changes too, but we're in discussions on that, and I'm not allowed to say anymore.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm not trying to put you or your colleagues in the Austrian government on the spot. I do think the consolidation and the streamlining of funds and funding programs is quite powerful. So I think that's a great first step, and obviously not the only step, but a really significant one. Next, I'm gonna go to Elena, and building off of the response around transportation and mobility, what's been your experience in Romania and in the early conversations around capacities about how national platforms, or in the Romanian context, how the Romanian government can help the cities who are part of this mission with aggressive action around transportation and mobility?
Thank you for asking. That's a very hot question for us, because at the national level, with the hub I mentioned earlier, the Mirror Mission Cities hub, we plan to bring together national ministries and funds that could support these cities in reaching their goals in mobility and transport targets they had. However, what we do, at least at the level of the Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digitalization in Romania, we provide funds to cities or to organizations that can help cities through these transnational calls to fund mobility solutions. That's something concrete. The future will show how things will pile up to help the cities, and we do hope a lot that the learning in capacities and this transnational and European exchange we are going to facilitate for our authorities will be really beneficial to support the cities. Of course, there are other funding sources, let's say, that already are accessible to them, but it would be our aim or ambition to bring them together under the same hub, let's say, to support the cities, but not only the selected one, also selected ones, but also the candidate and the others willing to fight for this climate neutrality objectives.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And I know that's going to be a really interesting and exciting process as we work together with the cities in Romania. I'm looking forward to that process. Next, Bjorn. One of the things that I think is exciting to ask a city like Stockholm, who, as you noted, has reduced emissions by about 70% so far over many years of effort and with some really significant help from national policy that's really helped to advance the cause in Sweden. So I'm going to ask you not about where you expect to be in 2030, because I think we know that, but where would you like to be as a city 3 years from now, 3 years into the process of getting the rest of the way there? What would be some milestones and some targets for Stockholm?
Well, I think, the time to 2030, it is just a few years. So we have a time pressure here. So what we need to do is to find the way to work forward with systemic change, and how to build alliances with people, with businesses, in order to take steps at the same time and go faster forward. But to find these working methods and these alliances, I really hope that we are there in 3 years' time.
Great, thanks. It's going to be fun to watch. I think a lot of the conversations we've had with cities so far, and talking about the mission, and as we've done some of the early work together, is helping to balance what they can do in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years with the overall ambition of the mission and the need to really stretch actions forward. And I think, going back to what Henrietta said in her opening comments, we need to constantly remind ourselves that we need to do research, we need to innovate, and we need to learn together. And so with that, we have time for one more short question for each of you. It's the one question, so you're each going to get to answer the same question, and hopefully with a quick and compelling response. And that question is, to share one thing over the last year since this mission has been active that you've learned from either other cities, from a national authority, or even from the EU in putting together the mission plan. What's one thing that you've learned that's really helped you think about the work that's ahead of you? I'll start with Bjorn.
I've been studying the webinars that have been sent, and there's a lot of very fruitful information. I've been impressed by some of the examples of digital support tools that have been presented by several cities that brings a lot of visibility and insight into the facts and the possible scenarios and so on. So that is an area in which I hope that we can also advance in the coming years.
Great, thanks for that. Elena, over to you.
I would say that I learned a lot about the value of the mutual learning and exchange, both with our funding partners across Europe, but also with the cities, and especially with the Mission Cities team. I think it is really to be praised, I don't know the right word, how quickly the cities mobilized, how quickly the mission succeeded to reach in all corners of Europe and mobilize cities and authorities. And I think that having this drive should be further explored, and we count a lot on it, at least with capacities, to really exchange and learn from each other. Sorry for that.
Great, thanks. Henrietta.
I think my heading would be always expect the unexpected. I do take an example from transportation, and we talked to one of our cities and they said, we try to address the kind of, taking cars away. We try to address this in a really participatory way, talking to all the citizens involved. And, the result was that actually citizens preferred the street traffic to go on because they were scared of, restaurants and bars arriving with all the, people and noise and tourists. So, when we in our bubble sometimes have this picture of, nice people drinking coffee and all the green, there's always aspects you learn. I guess this is the same as Elena. You learn from really, working very closely with, the people we actually do this for in the end, which is citizens.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Really, really great to have your insights and your contributions to this discussion. I think it's been quite a compelling year, and I would reflect one of the things that struck me is how many cities have been meaningfully grappling with their budget process as it relates to climate and trying to figure out how to really make sure how they're spending their resources, how city government as an entity delivering services on behalf of their resident are doing as much as possible through their own budgeting. And I think we've seen some real leadership from cities like Oslo, and we've been able to share that with some of the other cities. And we're looking forward to how other cities build upon that. And I think that's one of the great features of the mission is with so many cities, they're going to be able to learn from what one city has done and make it even better in their own context. And I think that's going to be an exciting part of the dynamic here. And I think for the folks who are listening and watching this webinar, the city's mission has several components. We talked about the Climate City contracts as a real tool to help cities work with their stakeholders and other units of government to build the authority to act collectively on our behalf to get to climate neutrality, and to help better organize the resources that exist. We heard our speakers talk about how important that will be to their efforts. We've also created an online platform and people who can help cities access all the available services and solutions that are available to help them on the journey. And I think the digital tools is an area that for many people, it feels quite inaccessible because we may not be that technical in our own background, or we may not have exposure to those tools. And so having access to those and having the support to begin to figure out how those tools can help us all together, I think is really critical in this process. We're also going to be funding pilot activities, which are really oriented not at specific projects, but helping cities as government work in the ways that they need to be able to achieve climate neutrality. We know that, and in the word cloud, you saw things around overcoming bureaucracy and some of the confusion around how institutions work and don't work. And we know that that's an issue. Cities talk about that all the time, whether it's working in departmental silos and the challenges of getting all the various parts of the city government working together. And so we have pilots to help test different ways of doing that. And I think that's going to be quite instructive. And all of that comes together in a city learning program that's really designed to help the folks like Bjorn and others share with each other, learn from each other, to feed into the national government efforts that Henrietta talked about, and to help capacities really address the needs of cities and build national platforms that are not just there, but really dynamic engines and drivers of change for our cities. And so we're really excited about all of those pieces coming together and how the process is going to unfold from here. Now that the cities have all been identified, they've started to engage with the European Union and the city's mission directly and with each other, and we're very excited for that. I think the last thing I'd like to say before closing is we also all know in recent months that we've seen increased attention on issues of energy security. It's created a crisis around energy supply and prices that's affecting all of us, as well as the need to really pay attention and accelerate the energy transition that we know is so important. And one of the things we want to continue to talk about with the cities, with the national platforms, and with national governments is how we all work together so that the city's mission can help bring leadership to that process. We know cities have a very specific and critical role in that transition, and we're hoping to be able to support everybody in that process in the coming months. With that, I'd like to thank all of our speakers again. Bjorn, Henrietta, Elena, thanks for being here in person. And Teresa, if you come back and watch this, thank you for your contribution as well. I wish you all the best, and thanks for joining us.